part of our update is looking at what a panel of educators from across Kentucky are going to share about opportunities and barriers that have been presented to gifted students through the pandemic. And please remember opportunities and barriers. And we know we have experienced both. So I will turn this over to Jenny Stith, who will moderate the panel. You're on, Jenny.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Good morning, everyone and fellow educators. I'm so excited to be here on this Saturday morning, and I'm really excited that there are so many of you who chose to join us on this gifted update. So the first thing we're going to do this morning is I want the panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll get started with our questions. So again, my name is Jenny Stith. I'm a gifted academic instructional coach in Jefferson County Public Schools. I have been in education for 20 years, and I'm also a KAGE board member. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with Dr. Adams and let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Toddy Adams. I am the Director of Gifted Services for Marshall County School. I've been a member of KAGE for a very long time, and I'm past president of KAGE.
Okay, Ms. Gann.
Hi, my name is Julie Gann. I'm from Fayette County, and I am the District Gifted and Talented Coordinator.
Dr. Broadbent.
Yes, I'm Dr. Broadbent at Breckinridge County Schools. I'm currently the Chief Academic Officer. I'm a former gifted and talented teacher and very strong advocate for gifted education.
And last but not least, one of my co-workers, Dr. Williams Hill.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Nyetta Williams Hill, and I'm a gifted teacher with Jefferson County Public Schools, and I'm also a board member on KAGE.
So thank you. So I want to start with how Webster defines passion. Webster says passion is a strong and barely controllable emotion. And one thing I've learned in my 20 years of education is educators are passionate. And then I joined the KAGE board and I saw an intensity of passion that I've never seen before. So I'm very excited to be a new member learning a lot. And we are passionate about policies. We are passionate about ideologies. We're passionate about our content areas, our peers, our schools, families, but most important, we're passionate about our students. And so today, for our audience members, I hope you feel the passion from these four amazing educators and you hear their voice, and the questions pertaining to gifted ed will help you move forward in your own gifted education experience. And so, as Dr. Roberts said, the focus of our panel today will be on the opportunities and barriers that for gifted students due to the pandemic. And so to my panelists, all of you are welcome to respond to every question. You can raise your digital hand, or you can just indicate that you want to answer by showing me your real hand. You will have approximately 2 minutes to respond. I think Dr. Roberts is correct that if you continue over 2 minutes and you're really into it, I'm not going to interrupt you. I'll just kind of give you a wave that we're getting close to the time so we can be timely and make sure we get to most of our questions today. And of course, if any audience members has questions at the end, you could type them in and we'll try to see if we have time for that. So let's go ahead and get started. And my first question is, what are some common pros and cons of distance learning? Dr. Williams Hill?
Thank you, Jenny. So during NTI, non-traditional instruction in Jefferson County Public Schools, I had the opportunity to administer a survey to a group of students. And so they were able to answer this question directly. And so they talked about the pros and cons and some barriers. And so I'm just going to reveal to you all some of the data that came forth based on that survey. So 22% of the students said that they really missed their friends during NTI. They weren't able to see them in person, so that had an impact on them. They also said, another 22% said that they felt like they had more work at home as opposed to if they were in the school. Now, some students, 11% said it was a weird and confusing time. 5% said that they felt lonely. However, 15% said that it was a good experience. And 11% said that they liked the overall NTI experience. So it had, they were feeling that loneliness and the strangeness of the time, but they were also able to see some of the positives as well. When they talked about their challenges during that time, the highest percentage came from internet and technology issues. Maybe they weren't able to have a really good Wi-Fi access. Maybe they didn't have the appropriate device. So that was about 50% of students said that was a great challenge to them. About 25% said that time was an issue, and they went back to the missing of their friends. So there were some things that they did see that were a challenge. Then when they talked about the positive aspects, there was a question, what have been the most positive aspects of NTI? 20% of the students said the flexibility. They enjoyed being able to log in and work on assignments at their own pace. And they enjoyed that flexibility that was different than being within the brick and mortar school. They also said being able to see and talk with their peers, even though it wasn't in person, since they weren't able to go into the school building, at least they were able to see them in a Google meeting. They also talked about the learning that happened during that time and that was really a positive. So those were the three main positives that came out of that survey. And then when I asked a question about how do you feel about returning to school, and the majority said they were very, very excited to return to school. So I think it allowed them to realize how much they enjoy being in school, although it gave them, they did have maybe some challenges as well, but they were really able to see how much they loved being in school.
Thank you, Nayada. Would any of the other panelists like to respond to the question, common pros and cons of distance learning?
I would just like to, I'll just add real quick to that. The importance of technology and getting all of our students access to Chromebooks or some type of technical support. I know at the beginning of trying the hotspots and trying to get internet access to all of our students was a challenge. But the importance of trying to remove the barrier of getting all of our students the technology needed so that they could continue learning on a daily basis with their teachers.
Great. Anyone else?
I'll go ahead and jump into Jennifer, if that's okay. That was incredible statistics by Dr. Williams-Hill. Thank you for sharing that. Pros, I definitely saw some of our most creative students, or students that are certainly gifted in technology, have the opportunity to shine during remote learning. Also, personally, as a school administrator last year, now at a district office, I've certainly seen a bigger focus on gifted education, our primary talent pool students, statistics, and our data based on NWEA from last year, certainly shown that our gifted and talented students, our primary talent pool students, are some of the students that have struggled the worst. On the con side of things, the pro side is the focus. The focus has certainly shifted more to our gifted and talented students, primary talent pool students. Seen a big shift in programs being offered for our gifted and talented students, primary talent pool students from last spring, and it can't be mentioned through the summer, being offered almost free to our students district-wide that are gifted and talented and primary talent pool students. And now a big shift into even offering programs during the school year, like a Wonderful Wednesday program for our gifted and talented students. So there are cons, obviously, from separation, but like many times when there's a need, we find a way. And that's certainly what I'm seeing across the state of Kentucky.
Thank you. Dr. Adams, anything else you want to add before we move on?
Well, I think that the pros would definitely be that students were able to work at their own pace, but there just seem to be so many cons as well, because when it comes to watching the behavior of students in the classroom, where you're looking for leadership skills, you're looking for creative thinking. So much of that was taken away during NTI. And we just had a lot of issues with identification, with kids not being in the classroom and working with each other. But I think that we are very resilient. We know that if there were any students that we may have missed over these past few months, we are definitely keeping an eye on them now. And I think we're all really hoping we don't go back to NTI.
Yes, well, I love all of your input and different perspectives at different levels. And Dr. Williams-Hill, I was surprised to hear that 20% enjoyed the flexibility. I know there's a lot of research about middle and high school students starting earlier and elementary starting later, and really that should be inverted. So it's kind of neat to hear some of your perspectives from the kids. So thank you for sharing. The next question is fairly similar, but it's focusing on the more positive aspects. So I have, what opportunities did the pandemic open up for our gifted students? You've touched on that a little bit, so I would love to hear maybe a little more in depth on what you think have been the most positive opportunities for our gifted students. Ms. Gann, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. I know in our district, our teachers were amazing, being very creative at trying to reach our students. And one thing that comes to mind, right to my mind, is talking about like the remote field trips, finding opportunities from around the globe of, and just opportunities that way. Places where our students would never have gone to before, art museums and so forth, were now available. Another thing I think about too is we had several of our teachers that would come together from several schools and have guest speakers, again, from all different realms of from business to Hollywood to Washington, D.C. So it was really interesting to see how, it was amazing to me how they were able to get these guest speakers, through the internet, and have these guest speakers speak to our students, and our students could do Q&As with them as well. So those are some opportunities that would not have happened if we were not all working virtually.
Michael, I noticed your thank you. Julie, Michael, I noticed that you wanted to add something.
Just to reiterate kind of what Julie is saying too, I think one aspect that was kind of a unforeseen positive was the interconnectivity, and simply being that, students that maybe before hadn't had the opportunity to work together, we're getting the opportunity to work together. Gifted and talented students, primary talent pool students across the school district, we're getting to connect in ways that they had never connected before. And then also a bigger focus on independent projects, passion projects, and the opportunity for students to shine in their areas and areas of interest.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on question number 2? Okay, Dr. Williams-Hill.
Mine is very similar. I just wanted to mention I work with 4 different elementary schools, and with that flexibilities, the students would log into my Google Meeting at a time that was convenient to them. So it's similar to what Dr. Broadbent was mentioning, where I had students from different schools collaborating and working on projects together. Or I have one student who's really passionate about building Minecraft worlds. And so they got to work together, and it was students who never would talk with each other. It would be unlikely that they would talk with each other in a different type of setting. So that was really great to see that collaboration from people throughout Louisville and from different schools.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Adams, please.
I think probably one of the best things that have come out of this is everybody's much more technology savvy, just like everyone is saying. And there's so many lessons that we learn. There's so many ways to share and to teach, and for the kids to learn, and many of those technological strategies are still being used, even though we're in the classroom, and there are maybe some kids quarantined. And I think that there's a lot of positive that have come out of it, and it's just changed our teaching a little bit and learning.
Thank you all. Ms. Gann, I love that you mentioned remote field trips. I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen as well. Kids can go anywhere in the world now. And to me, that makes that interconnectivity that some of you mentioned much realer. And I don't know about you, but I feel like as big as our world is, it's getting smaller because of this connected through technology. So thank you. Okay, our next question is going to focus on social and emotional health this morning. What have been some of the impacts of the pandemic on students' social and emotional health? And then a follow-up to that is, what can school personnel and really families as well do to support this impact? Dr. Williamson, I'll let you begin.
Thank you, Jenny. So, although gifted students excel at higher levels in their identified area, a lot of times that social emotional development is not at that same high level. So, throughout this time, everyone has been experiencing a lot of anxiety and stress and worry, and that has been impacting gifted students as well, especially those students who might be twice exceptional. So those are students who are gifted but might have a learning or a physical difference as well. So some things that we can do if you're thinking about your gifted students and the effects that the pandemic have had on their social emotional health. And I was looking at the NAGC website, and there's a lot of resources there, but just some really basic things that you all can do as teachers and parents is to be patient, be supportive, not to judge your children or your students, and allow them to voice what's going on and not to minimalize it in any type of way. Provide them with love and affirmation and affection, and allow for structured routines at home and also in school now that we're back, as structured as possible, but of course being fluid with the constant changes. And then just simple things like family activities at home to provide that stimulation and that enjoyment, video chats with people who they might not be able to see otherwise. So just really being supportive and listening to the students and allowing them to talk about what's bothering them.
Thank you. Toddy, I noticed you wanted to respond as well, please.
Yes. Whenever, not just in Marshall County, but across the region, I know that we are all of the same mind that as we service our gifted population, we are always looking at their social, emotional well-being first, and academics will come later, because if the kids are not okay emotionally, we're not going to ask them to move on academically. So when a guidance counselor, or if I was checking grades and I saw that some of our gifted kids were faltering during NTI, or if they were quarantined, when I would call them and to check on them, it always went back to a social emotional issue. They needed that love, they needed that support for their academics to be okay. So I guess my point is, whether it's NTI or whether we're meeting with kids face to face, the social emotional always has to come first, and then the academics, the creativity, the leadership, whatever, that will follow.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel want to respond to the social emotional impacts of the pandemic?
I'll jump. Sorry, go ahead, Julie. Go ahead,
Go
Julie.
ahead, Julie, we'll start with you and then we'll finish with Michael.
Yeah, I was going to add, I was just speaking with a teacher the other day in the school, and she was talking about just the heightened anxiety that their students are facing, and just with worried about death, and they have family members or friends, and so going back to what Nayetta said, being that listening partner as a teacher, as a parent, just listening to them. Small groups. I know in Fayette County we have a social emotional learning curriculum that we do daily to begin the day in our schools. So there, obviously there's curriculum out there, but again, being that listening partner is so incredibly important for our students.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. Also, just kind of adding to what everyone else has said, the connection and communication with parents and families really during this pandemic is another pro, in my opinion, and it's certainly made a better connection with our gifted and talented teachers and coordinators of ways that parents can help their gifted and primary talented children, with whether it be through strategies or activities or resources available to them There's certainly been a higher level of participation and connection with parents and families during this time. And one of the things I kept hearing over and over and over is Maslow before Bloom, just making sure we're meeting the individual needs of our kids before we worry about that in-depth learning. Because if we're not taking care of their needs, we're not going to be able to reach them when they're learning.
Thank you all so much. What a great comprehensive answer from all of you. So my next question is about family resources. And we've touched a little bit about it, but where can families find resources that will aid them in supporting their gifted children? I saw that Kathy Anderson had plenty of resources linked there, but can any of you touch on anything more specific that you've found very helpful currently? And then, of course, is there any web-based or gifted resources or programs that work best for self-paced and independent learning? So again, it's kind of a twofold question. Just generally resources families can use to support their gifted kids. And do you have anything specific for self-paced or independent learning? And who would like to start? Nayetta?
Thanks, Jenny. So the NAGC has lots of National Association for Gifted Children website has lots of great resources. They have a specific magazine called Parenting for High Potential that is on the website. And they also have, if you go to information, then publications, and then for parents, that's where you'll find that. And they also have a frequently asked questions section, a common myths section, and helping your child succeed. So those are all resources that will help parents and teachers as well support their gifted children. And then KAGE has resources as well. They have their Facebook and their Twitter feeds, as well as a brochure. What are you doing to find and develop my child's talents? So those are some parent resources. And then for kids, a couple that I really enjoy using are Mensa for kids. They have games. They have a Mensa magazine that's written by kids for kids. They also have lesson plans, and some of the lesson plans are written where the students can go through and do it at their own self-pace, as well as the PBS Learning Media. That's really great source for interactive lessons and just a plethora of topics. So there are more, but I'll let everyone else share. I don't want to take everyone else's time.
Well, thanks. Anyone else want to speak on the topic of resources that will aid families with their gifted students, or resources that work best for self-paced and independent learning? Julie?
I would just add Sing as another resource for our families for the social emotional, since you're just speaking to the social emotional learning. It's a great resource for our parents as well as our teachers and administrators as well.
And just for our audience members, Tyler has been great in dropping these websites into the chat. If you're interested in any of the things that Nayetta or Julie have mentioned, we're dropping that right into the chat so you have that accessible to you now. Dr. Broadbent or Dr. Adams, do you want to add anything else to this conversation?
I use the same things.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so my next question is how did your school system adjust identification services during non-traditional NTI e-learning? Dr. Broadbent?
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in. Certainly, one of the biggest things we had to adjust is how we would go about assessing them. If students aren't in person, and it's a little bit more difficult. So we had to set up, and it was actually a positive experience, I believe, because we set up individual meetings and individual times and individual conferences where we would personally make appointments with parents and families, and we did have face-to-face assessment time for the most part. And there also was a lot more flexibility, which in some ways maybe is needed anyhow, and creativity with, looking at students' identification. So if anything, I saw a higher level of creativity and looking at different forms of assessment and ways to identify students, which in turn, like I said, I think was something that was needed anyhow.
Yes. Julie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'll add, even after we did our screenings and did our testing, again, we had to adjust the way we did our testing as well, and our window was widened. And again, that was great flexibility that we were allowed to have. how our committees came together to make those decisions. So again, virtually via Zoom, we'd have our gifted placement committees, coming together, everyone being at different places and going through. And then we had to create new documents, obviously, so that they were Google Forms or editable documents that we could share on a screen, so we could go through and look at evidences, look at test scores. And collecting the evidences look different too. When you were the students were at home, and getting the classroom teachers to collect those anecdotal notes, they didn't always have an actual piece of paper for that portfolio. So it just everything just shifted a little bit, but we did get through it.
Thank you. Yeah, Toddy.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself for just a minute. Our identification meetings, our committee meetings, everything that we do is digital to begin with. So a lot of that didn't change. We share Google Documents. We can Zoom if we need to. If we do meet in person, everybody's still on their own, digital document. But like I mentioned before, where we could look at some academics where teachers could give anecdotal observations of their students, whether they were virtual or whether they were in the classroom. Because we implement GTRTI in Marshall County, and when you think of your tier 3 kids as your gifted learners and your tier 2 kids as on a watch list, as we would have our meetings and discuss the kids on the watch list, whether they were virtual or in person, even when we were in complete NTI, those children were constantly talked about. And when it came time to fill out teacher recommendations at the end of the school year, I'll be honest, we didn't have as many recommendations in the past because the teachers didn't feel like they could submit them with fidelity. They feel like that there were gifted characteristics that they weren't able to see because of the situation. But those children remained on the watch list. They are flagged for this year and as the year goes on. So, none of that has gone away. Our identification numbers did go down, but we're not worrying about that. That was the situation. And we have our kids flagged, and we're going to see how they do this year. And we will actually be doing continuous identification as teachers are saying, yes, that child was flagged. Yes, I see it. Here are the characteristics of giftedness. And we're just going to go on from there.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that question before we move on? Yes, Dr. Williamson.
Just quickly, in Jefferson County Public Schools, we currently use the paper pencil KOGAT. So we found that it just wasn't going to be equitable to have students schedule times to come in and take that, because some students would be able to, whereas other students would not, due to transportation or parents working or what have you. So we postponed that. And so now that all the kids are back in school, that will be happening coming up in October. So that's one thing that we did. And then of course that rolling identification. So teachers don't feel like they have a deadline or a certain stopping point, but if they see these gifted characteristics, they're still able to identify their students.
Thank you. So my next question is about student engagement. What are some of the best ways that you've seen to keep students engaged and challenged during our pandemic, particularly if they are out of school due to being quarantined? Anyone want to start that one? Okay, Ms. Gann, I'm going to let you start.
Just again, talking with teachers just recently, because again, now we have students now going into quarantine. And so they were just speaking to this, and I'll even referencing what Michael had talked about, those passion projects, because I know a lot of this has to go back to keep students engaged. We have to keep their interest. To keep their interest, we have to know what their interests are. So it's that relationship piece that's very important, first and foremost, with our teachers and our students. And then, an offering then from there, choice. Again, engagement we know what the outcome needs to be. We know what the curriculum is. We have the standards. So within that, where can we be flexible in creating choices in the product or the projects that they're doing in the classroom? So that seems to be, again, right back on the top of many teachers' minds with trying to keep our students engaged while they're home, currently in quarantine.
Great. Dr. Broadbent, did you want to add something? I thought I
Well,
saw your hand.
You did, and she said everything I was getting ready to say. Just echoing Julie, just choice board activities, independent projects, passion projects, just a real big focus on individual students, individual student interests, individual student needs, and then building on those to make sure we're keeping our gifted and talented students, primary talent pool, and really all students engaged and interested in learning.
Yes. Okay. Miss Dr. Adams.
I'm gonna be honest with you. This was probably one of the most difficult tasks during NTI with student engagement. When you think about a child in the classroom, it's not just that the teacher is engaging them. They are constantly redirecting their attention on the task at hand. So when you have kids in the classroom, you've got the teacher who can see who's working, who's not working. You bring them back. It's one of the reasons teaching is an art. It's why people are called to be educators. It's not passing along information or giving a task and having a student complete it. So this is, we really don't have the answer to that. When kids were on their own at home, it didn't matter how interesting the project, it didn't matter how redundant the schoolwork was. They were at home, they had other things to do, and they didn't want to do their schoolwork. So honestly, we didn't really find an answer for that. It was very difficult for the kids to do their required schoolwork, much less fun projects or interesting or challenging projects. And I honestly still don't have an answer to that.
Dr. Adams, I commend you on that honesty. I think sometimes that's things we all want to say and we're kind of afraid to say it, but I think that is so good to hear as someone who's been in the same boat, just going, oh, good. It's not just my district, my school system. So thank you for that. We had a comment from Lisa that says she loves that you called it an art. Teaching is an art. So thank you for your contribution, Lisa, as well. So we are about 10 minutes, 12 minutes left. I do have a question from the audience that wasn't on our list, but I want to, as the moderator, consider our audience. So I'm going to ask this. This is an opinion question. And so they asked, an audience member wants to know, how do you all feel about House Bill 208 limiting NTI days versus the unlimited that we experienced previously? Anyone? That's a hot topic. So it is an opinion question. If you're not comfortable, I understand, but I at least thought I'd see if anyone is willing to share some thoughts on that. Dr. Williams-Hill?
I'm just going to go based on that small study that I did, and just from student perspectives, they really do enjoy being in the classroom. So I think taking measures that we can to ensure that students are able to be in the classroom as much as possible is important in many regards. So that's just my overarching comment on that question.
Thank you. Toddy, I saw your hand.
I think kids need to be in the schools, no matter what level of learning they're at, they need to be in the schools. But I'm very torn because this is a safety issue as well. So I guess I'm saying that it's hard to have an opinion on it because we are looking at their social and emotional well-being against their physical well-being. And that's just a very difficult question to answer.
I agree. Michael?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I wasn't sure if I wanted to answer or not because it's definitely a political question right now.
Yes.
There's definitely, and I understand why the bill exists. I mean, I think we all do. Kids need to be in school. kids need to be together, need to be able to learn together. But with that being said, we're facing a lot of problems right now. I know my school district and a lot of school districts around me, and I'm sure everybody in this chat right now, we're starting to see cases. We're starting to see cases with kids. We're starting to see situations that we didn't deal with before. So it is a scary situation, but in light of that, I do understand the limitation, that we need to do all we can to try to keep kids in school if possible. I do personally feel, and maybe I shouldn't say personally, but I do personally feel that's probably going to lighten up if things continue to get worse. But I like to see the light at the end of the tunnel and say we're going to fight through it and things are going to get better.
Thank you all. I know that was a hot topic and very politically charged question, and I appreciate everyone's flexibility in sharing some thoughts on that. Any other comments on that one before we move on to our last few questions? Okay, so let's see here. I want to touch on the social justice movement that's been spreading across the country. How have gifted students responded to the social justice movement? What are some of the ways teachers can facilitate learning and courageous conversations? All right, Nayed, I'll let you start. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So with regard to social justice, if you watch the news and read various publications, student activism has been on the rise, and students do find topics that they're passionate about and they want to learn more about these topics. And I think it is important to allow students to follow their passion and learn more about issues that are important to them. So some things that we can do as educators are allow a safe space for students to discuss their passions and maybe their concerns, and then provide students with the opportunity to research historical impacts on current events so that they can know why something is happening now, and that historical benchmark that precedented it. And then thinking about having a diverse library in your classroom that has books from different cultures, allowing for that cultural diversity. And like I said, just having those conversations about race, ethnicity, gender, and other topics that can be anchored with a supportive text. If you aren't feeling comfortable, then you could reach out to experts in the field who could maybe come in and talk with the group or share their expertise with you to help guide conversations. And I know in Jefferson County Public Schools, we have the Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Department. And so we have a resource where people can come out and assist with some of those conversations and provide resources. So I think it's all about giving students the ability to have a voice and talk about things that are important to them, and then allowing them to move forward with some things that they want to do to promote change.
Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about the social justice movement and helping people facilitate courageous conversations? Dr. Adams, thank you.
I just want to remind educators that curriculum is not a book that you get that has lessons. Curriculum is everything that kids are learning in the classroom. So let me touch on the hidden curriculum for just a minute. Imagine that you are a language arts teacher and you're going to teach poetry, and you have a bulletin board of famous poets, and let's just say that they're all white. So you may not be actually teaching that all famous poets are white, but subconsciously, when students see this, that's just what they're going to assume. So we have to be very, very careful what we put out there, whether it's a lesson or whether it's our bulletin boards or whether it is our conversation, to include people of all ethnicities, of whatever, so that sparks conversations, that we can talk about what has happened all over the world, not just in our our little bubble. And even being aware of those small things, it's hopefully would open up conversation of all, different people.
Thank you so much. Ms. Gann, did I see you wanted to add something, or you're okay?
And I was just going to add, even when Diana talked about that safe space, I thought so very important, that relationship piece. And I always speak to that because I find that it's one of the most important things with our students and our teachers and our faculty members is that relationship. So if you can provide that safe space for our students to be able to come to an adult or, to create these opportunities to learn more and then to, do the research they're doing, to share, to drive their passion and to change things. So I just want to add that.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to finish us off on this topic?
Be glad to. Recently, I got to hear Dr. Cleveland speak on this topic from Eastern Kentucky University. And one of the biggest things I think that I took away from that is that we give each other grace to have conversation and realize that we come from different backgrounds and we have different associates, we come from different cultures and things like that, and that we're going to have differing opinions, and that's okay, and getting back to the art, to being able to have conversation and being respectful and being able to have tough conversations. And at the end of the day, that's okay. At the end of the day, sometimes we're going to agree to disagree, and that's okay too. But it's certainly a lost art in our world in many ways, but that's part of what we do in the classroom is we teach kids the art of conversation, and sometimes the art of disagreement.
Yes. I think Colin Seal once said we need to teach students to agree, disagree, agreeably. Am I saying that right? Anyway, you all know where I was headed. All right, I think we have time for one more question. And so I want to talk about the concept of underachievers. We'll finish that off as our final conversation. Underachievers is a concept that most gifted educators are aware of, and I feel that regular education teachers struggle to understand. I hear phrases like, well, I don't see his or her giftedness. What support or responses can we give regular classroom educators to help them understand this idea of underachievers? Anyone want to start? Yes, Julie?
What I always with our teachers and with with faculty is underachieving. Our students are going to look different. We have a idea of what a gifted student looks like, and that's not how all of our students look like. And going through our special considerations, when you look at twice exceptional, disadvantage or underachieving, all of those, and that our students look different. So providing resources to them, sharing some ideas, going into the classroom and sharing some as a gifted resource teacher or a gifted expert, going into the classroom and sharing with the classroom teacher, did you see what this child did when they thought this way outside the box, or they did this, or they're a creative thinker that way, and bringing light to it so that because it does look different. They come to the table with different experiences, and underachieving, it's hard. It's a situation where you have a student that may lack the motivation. And why are they lacking the motivation? Again, going back to that relationship, is trying to find that interest of what we can do to engage that student once again. But again, just helping teachers to see and being that partner and being that thought partner with them as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gann. Anyone else want to talk about the concept of underachievers? Yes, Dr. Williams-Hill?
So one of the common myths is that a child can't be gifted due to their grades. If their grades aren't straight A's, then they're not gifted. And so that's kind of what Julie was touching on. And I think it goes to educating educators about the myths of giftedness, and then thinking about product choices and how are the students able to show their understanding, because maybe the product choice that the teacher has, the assessment that the teacher has provided just isn't one that's going to allow that child to really show their gifts. Maybe they need to be creative in terms of the different products. Like maybe that child would be really great at doing a podcast about the topic, but might not be able to really write an essay on the topic. So I'm just looking at different ways that students can express their understanding of the topic, and also knowing the students and their interest areas, because it could be that they're very interested in a certain subject, but you just haven't touched on that key interest point. So just getting to know the students and allowing them some choice and some individuality.
Thank you. Anyone else want to finish us up with the idea of underachievers? Dr. Adams, thank you. And Michael, we'll come back to you too, I promise.
You know, one word that keeps coming up is relationships. And I just have to say that if during the identification process, if GT coordinators are using test scores or grades as a jumping off point, they could be identifying students who are high achieving students, and they may not necessarily be gifted, and they may be missing many kids who are either underachievers, or they may have different cultural backgrounds. But it goes back to that relationship and knowing your students. And like Nayetta said, educating the educators of what we're looking for with those gifted characteristics, even if those gifted characteristics might be masked by a disability or whatever. So when you talk to teachers and when you have your professional development, whether it's a very formal professional development, or it's when you get together during professional learning times or whatever, it's constantly educating them about those gifted characteristics, what we're looking for, how they may be masked, and it goes back to that relationship and knowing the kids.
Thank you. And Michael, I'm going to let you briefly say your final comments for us for our panel discussion today.
First, I want to say, Toddy, that was amazing. Great answer.
It was.
And kind of, she stole my thunder a little bit, but what I want to say there is a little bit of, there's a really good book that says, without vision, the people fall astray. And, kids and teachers and all of us as educators, we need a clear vision, of what it is that we're looking for in students. And then also, and Toddy hit on it so strong right there, the relationship piece. This is something that's very, very big to me. So, and I won't talk very much longer, I promise. But that I was one of those, I was one of those underachievers. And if it hadn't been for my relationship with a 5th grade teacher, that happened to be the first male teacher I ever had, I know I wouldn't be sitting here today, So it takes us as educators building those relationships with kids and seeing things maybe that other people didn't see in them.
Thank you. So that wraps up our panel discussion for today. To my audience, thank you all so much. Thank you to the panelists. I appreciate you. I appreciate the tough conversations that I put you under today and your opinions and your comprehensive answers to that. We have had a request from the audience that we could, if you all could each type in your email addresses for the audience members for reaching out purposes. We'd love to be able to reach out and contact you for more information. That was one of the requests. And I just want to end today with the quote from Dr. Cleveland. I think we just all need to give each other grace and move forward with that passion that we all have as educators. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, panelists, and have a great afternoon.
Please let me add my thank you to all of the panelists and to the moderator of the panel. Such good ideas that get all of us thinking about things that we need to be doing as we move forward this year. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts.